So today's presentation is on e-commerce solutions for direct marketing farms. I call it a presentation, but I'm going to try as much as possible to keep the presentation somewhat short, maybe to 20 to 30 minutes, so that we have some time that if people want to ask questions or have discussions. I definitely have a lot of experience in this realm and like helping farmers make this particular decision of how to sell online, whether to sell online. But I think it's really helpful to bring everybody's experiences into the mix here, and if there's conversation to be had, I think everybody's experience selling for their own farm is definitely valid and worth hearing. So with that said, I will introduce myself here. So what am I doing talking about this topic? My name is Mike Parker, and I work for the National Young Farmers Coalition. I'm based in New York State. We're a national organization that mostly works on advocacy projects. So we have a DC office that are of lobbyists that are kind of fighting for the future of agriculture for young farmers. So we're doing a lot of policy change. We have chapters all throughout the country, young farmer-led chapters, including at least one in Ohio. I think it's just the one in Ohio. And in addition to doing that kind of policy work, because we have such close relationships with farmers all around the country, we do get into a lot of different technical assistance projects, and that's really my role of the coalition, is being able to specialize in understanding the kinds of businesses that young, diversified, direct marketing farmers start, their business models, understanding their kind of access to land and access to credit, and how they do marketing. So that's sort of the realm of where I have some experience. I'm also a first-generation farmer myself, raising livestock in Cooperstown, New York. And the real reason, I guess, why I'm comfortable talking about this topic is that about 3 years ago, the National Young Farmers Coalition started working on this project. You see it listed right here, called Farm Generations Cooperative and Grown By. So Farm Generations Cooperative is a new sort of offshoot, like sister organization of our coalition. It's an agricultural cooperative, and for the last 2 years, we've been developing a product called Grown By. And Grown By is a direct sales platform that we've been beta testing for the last year. We're doing a little bit of a soft launch this week, actually, and will be available for any farmer to use in the coming weeks for your online sales. And in the time of business planning for Grown By and trying to get funding for Grown By and hiring and all that, obviously I've been doing a lot of research about the competitors out there and the other kinds of farm sales software that's been available, and also the kinds of software that farmers are using that is not specifically for farm sales, but is useful, like e-commerce software. So in that time, I've gotten a little bit of experience with that. And when COVID kind of hit last year in the early spring, and farmers markets started to be canceled, and just a lot of people were wondering how they were going to start selling the things that they would usually sell at markets, or usually sell to restaurants. One thing that our coalition did to respond to that was to write this Farmer's Guide to Direct Sales Software Platforms. So this is a project that I worked on last, February, March. And it is basically, we'll walk through it later on in the presentation, I guess. I'll just show you where you can find it and what's in there. But basically, it's a guide to, I think, 17 different software platforms that were built for farmers. It shows the different pricing, what kinds of capabilities it has, what kinds of farms that's made for, that those platforms are made for, because I think that's the key to approaching this whole topic, is that not all farms marketing is the same. So depending on the kinds of things that you want to do, if you have a CSA, if you want to offer pre-orders for your farm stand, if you also have wholesale customers but need to offer them different prices than your retail customers, all these different things really need to limit the kind of which platform is right for you. Also, things like the pricing and how pricing's done. If you're a really small farm and you maybe don't want to be spending $100 a month for software, maybe you'd rather be paying like a percentage fee on your sales because maybe you only sell $1,000 worth of stuff a month. So all those you kind of have to take into account to find the right platform, and to get yourself set up on one of these platforms could take hours. For some of them, it could take days. So it's not something that you want to just jump into without. And some of them have startup fees, like a fee before you could even get into the software. So it's really something you want to do a lot of research with, so you're not wasting time or money. Okay, so for the presentation, I'm basically going to walk through what I think is sort of a like a framework for choosing a direct sales software platform or an e-commerce platform. And then I'll show you a couple different resources that I think will be, we won't go through them in depth, but I'll show you a couple different resources that I think could also make you help make that decision if it's something you're going through now. Okay. So for choosing a platform, I think there's two main approaches that you need to be thinking about: the pricing and the sales type, or like the features that it supports. So I'll actually start on the right side here with the pricing. Typically, any kind of software platform is going to have 3 different ways of charging you. Sometimes it charges you in more than one of these ways. So the first is a percentage of sales. So that's if it's somewhat common to have like a 2% charge on the sales. So every time you sell something, you're giving a percentage of it to the platform. That's really common for other sorts of e-commerce platforms, things like like Airbnb or Uber, like any of those apps that you might use. You often see when you're paying for something, there's a platform fee or some kind of percentage fee. So that's super common in the industry to have that percentage of sales. More common among these farm sales platforms is a monthly fee. So something like you might be paying $69 or $99 or $150 a month to be using the platform. And then there's often this second part here, these upcharges for features or for a different like amount of sales once you hit like a threshold. So I'd say that is something to really look out for if you are looking at a platform that charges you monthly. You really want to understand what you're actually being charged for monthly, and if you're going to be charged 3 times as much because you actually sell at a higher threshold than their entry-level customer, or because you need some kind of features that for you seem like just run-of-the-mill features. This is what I need to run my business. But for the platform, for whatever reason, they might charge you every month for that feature. In general, I would try to avoid, if possible, the kinds of platforms that charge you a monthly fee and that charge for specific features, unless you have a really simple sales model for your farm. So if you're the kind of farm that has a CSA and also has a farm stand and also has some restaurant customers, if you're doing all those kinds of direct marketing, you might end up paying a lot for the additional features that you need, because that's sort of how these companies are trying to make their money, is even though they've developed the feature and it doesn't cost them any more to turn it on or turn it off for you, it's just the way that they feel like they need to make money. So you could end up paying a lot for a product that just satisfies your basic needs. The third thing to look out for is setup fees. So again, I think it's really helpful to get yourself introduced to a platform before you start paying for it. And so that's something to look out for if somebody's going to try to charge you like $500 before you actually get your products up. Really, the only way to feel familiar and comfortable with software is using it yourself, and you can watch as many videos as you want or listen to somebody's sales pitch, but you don't really get it, I don't think, until you actually go ahead and set up your farm and look at what the storefront looks like. So anything with a setup fee is sort of a red flag to me that you're going to have to pay before you get that real experience. So those are the pricing criteria to consider. The sales types is the thing that'll sort of, as long as you know the ways that you want to sell, you just want to not look at any of the platforms that don't support the ways you want to sell. unless you're willing to sell through multiple platforms, which I meet tons of farms that end up doing that. They use one kind of software for most of their sales, like for their CSA, but they might be doing something else for their farm stand. And then ideally that's not what you want to do, just from the back end administration of things, like entering all of your products in multiple platforms is pain, and doing record keeping in any way that's going to help you with financial analysis and making good decisions is it makes that harder. But at the same time, it's sort of hard to find any platform that's actually going to support all the different kinds of ways you sell, unless you have a pretty simple sales model. So the three key sales types that I see that different platforms are often made for one or another of these. So I think it's really helpful to break them down that way. The first one is CSA, which is really just any kind of subscription program. I think people in different parts of the country, or even on a farm by farm basis, define CSA differently. Like there's so many unique CSA models out there. And even the CSA specific platforms typically don't support all of the different kinds of things that farmers call CSAs, but there's certainly some platforms that are much better for CSAs or any kind of subscription sales than others. We'll get into those next. The second kind of sales type that you see a lot of platforms built for, or are what I call standard e-commerce sales, or pre-orders for farmers markets or farm stands. So this is an area where, and we'll get into this, where you might be just as well trying to find a product that's not built specifically for farmers. If you have pretty simple standard e-commerce sales, like standard e-commerce to me means, you know, like buying something on Amazon or buying something from Walmart.com, where you buy a product, it's probably not perishable, you're probably shipping it to a customer, or you have some other kind of simple distribution mechanism, like a pre-order at a farmer's market or a farm stand. Like, I'm buying this product, here's where you pick it up. The third type of sales that there's specific products built for are any kind of multi-farm or food hub model. And that's one of the areas where you want to be really specific about which platform you choose, because most of them are not built for multiple farms to be selling through one storefront. And yeah, so there's some platforms that are built just specifically for that. Let me just take a sip here. If anybody has any questions, by the way, feel free to throw them in the chat, or even unmute yourself if that's possible and call out questions. Happy to stop in between here. So let's jump into these which platforms that I see exist for these three different sales types. So the first are CSA specific platforms. So four of the kind of major platforms for that are Harvey, CSAware, Farmigo, and the one that our co-op is developing, Grown By. And I think when you look into these different platforms, I'll show you guys a resource towards the end here that will give you some farmers like specific takes on these, and you could see some videos of them in use. So yeah, we won't do that kind of during the presentation. You can kind of do the research on your own. But the two questions that I would ask if you have a CSA and you are looking for a platform are just understanding, when you are allowing your customers to customize their shares, I guess for one, do you allow your customers to customize your shares, and what do you mean by customization? Because these platforms all think of customization as something different. So for instance, Harvey is and Harvey, I think more people in your area in the Midwest are more familiar with. They have the CSA model where the customer can be given pretty full ability to customize their share week to week. So they can indicate which specific fruits or vegetables that they prefer, and maybe ones that they don't like, and then week to week be able to create a custom basket for themselves out of what you have available in your weekly harvest or monthly harvest, however you do your CSA. So that's not something that every platform is able to do. Like, I think Farmigo has some ability to do that, but Grown By and CSAware are certainly not built for that. So if that's a feature that you really need, it's something like Harvey that you're probably looking towards. Other kinds of customizations, though, are, some platforms will have them, some won't. So if you want to think like the ability to let your customers choose where to pick up their shares, you have multiple CSA pickup sites. Like that's the kind of thing that some platforms will have, some won't, and it's just questions that you need to ask just to make sure it's not breaking your business model to use a platform like this. The second question I would ask is what else besides CSA you need to do with your e-commerce platform. So CSA is one of those business models that I think is really specific. The software features that you need to run a good, efficient CSA online are different from what you need to just sell basic products through a regular sale or through shipping or something or through home delivery. And so if you're doing CSA and another model, you just need to make sure that your CSA software is going to support that other model. And often they don't, or they will only if you pay an upcharge for it. So those are some CSA platforms. The place where there are the most platforms, and I just threw out 4 of them here, are for standard e-commerce and for pre-order sales. So this is because this is the simplest sort of sale to make online. Unlike CSA, where there's a schedule and you have like a customer list that might be needing to log in regularly or be getting communications from the platform. Standard e-commerce sales is just like you buy the thing once and then you're done. It's got to do is the transaction. There's no communications. There's no changing your order week to week. So there are a lot of products that exist for this, and I'd say there's a lot of products that are not farm specific that are great for standard e-commerce and that are more affordable, that have many more programmers working on them, that have gotten a lot more like venture capital investment, that are not going to have bugs, and they're going to have a customer support even if you're calling them at 11 p.m. on a Sunday or something. So this is the place where I would say this second question here is key, is why are you choosing a farm-centric platform? Like, what does your farm need to do that something like Shopify or Squarespace or Square can't do, which sometimes there's really good reasons for that. Sometimes there's things like, Gray's Cart, for instance, is really popular for livestock producers and people that are doing home delivery because it's really specific to this home delivery and shipping model. They've built their product, they're farmers that have built, they're also livestock farmers in Indiana that have built this product for their farm and for their model. So if you have a similar sales model to them, the product is going to work really great for you because they built it for that model. And things like, if you're selling steaks online and you don't want to list 50 different products with all the different weights, you have a ribeye steak that's 0.75 pounds and 0.76 and 0.77, like you don't want to list those as separate products. You just say ribeye steak and you say the weight of the product. It's really sometimes challenging for an e-commerce product to, you're not going to list all those products individually. So you want the customer to make the purchase, indicate that they want a ribeye steak, but you don't want to charge them then. You actually want to charge them when you go into your freezer and say they're going to get this ribeye steak at this weight. So, a lot of e-commerce platforms are not going to have that capability that you can have a customer place an order, but not charge them until you actually give them the product that you're giving them. But Gray's Cart was kind of set up for that, is one kind of example of why you'd want a farm-centric platform rather than using like Shopify or something. So other examples are Barn to Door and Local Line. Local Line, I think, is a Canadian company that seems to have been getting a lot more popular last year during the pandemic. And Barn to Door has been around for a few years. I think you usually see them at most conferences pushing their product. And Barn to Door, from what I understand, is a lot of farmers like it because you can make the shopping experience kind of live on your own farm website. So if you already have a farm website that you like, you don't necessarily need to be pushing people to a different website. Gray's Cart's like this too, where you can just embed it into your website, and to the customer, it looks like they're all, they're coming to your website, they see your about you, they see your farm photos, see your contact information, and they see your shop. Whereas there are other platforms that you have to send them to that platform. You get a you get a URL like localline.com/your farm name, which sometimes people don't like being able to do, especially if you put time and money into your own website. Okay. The last model here, I'll probably spend the least time on because I think this is usually least people are interested in doing this or are doing this or need to do this. But multi-farm sales platforms do exist out there. And typically they're made specifically for multi-farm sales. So these will give you a lot more bells and whistles for things like being able to have multiple users, and all those users have their own inventory and can have the ability to set their own inventory, but the storefront looks like one thing to consumers. So if you are running some kind of multi-farm sales program, so even if you're something like a farmer's market that wants all the farmers in your market to be able to sell together, or like do pre-ordered sales together. So, you send out once a week a newsletter to your farmers market customers and say, go to our local food marketplace page and you can see everybody in our market and all of their inventory, and you can make one purchase of all the products that you want. You'd want to look for something like this because none of the other platforms are going to be able to have that kind of capacity. So there's 4 that I put right here: Farmigo, Local Food Marketplace, Local Orbit, and Open Food Network are 4 different platforms that can manage that. Open Food Network, I should mention, is, from what I understand, a lot more do-it-yourself. So if you're really either technology savvy or you are something like a food hub that has a staff that's managing this, that's like managing the sales and setting up the storefront, Open Food Network is it's open source software. It's used it's really popular in places like Australia and Great Britain and France and I think Spain. So in Europe and other places, it's a lot more popular. In the US, it's not so popular, but there's a really robust network of people that work on it internationally, and it just takes some time to actually use Open Food Network for your storefront. Whereas something like Local Food Marketplace is, a pretty straightforward product that's, you're not have to get into too much setup on your own. You're just using it like a user of the software rather than like an administrator of the software. Yeah, and so the questions that I would ask for a multi-farm, if you're trying to do a multi-farm sales program, is who's actually managing all the sales? Like, is there one organization, one food hub, and its staff is managing the sales, and the farmers are a little bit one step removed from the sales? If that's the case, you might think maybe I don't actually need a multi-farm sales platform because I'm actually dealing with my ordering and my invoicing off of the platform, and really I just need something to make the sale to customers. So that second question kind of gets to that too, like how are your payments and inventory administered? If you're already doing inventory for multiple farms and managing the sales for multiple farms, you don't necessarily need a new system that will offer like inventory management unless that's something that you're looking for. Like if you're just trying to start selling online, rather than getting all of your solutions from a new piece of software, then that's a decision that you want to make. And that's sort of where that gets to with that hacking another platform. Like even if you are running a multi-farm sales program, does your customer really need to know like where everything's coming from in that? Like, does your customer need to see it that way? Like, or is it straightforward enough that you could just have like a barn to door page where you put all the inventory if you're managing the inventory yourself, rather than asking all the farms to manage the inventory as multiple users? Yeah. So those are the 3 different main kinds of sales that I pulled out: CSA, standard e-commerce, and multi-farm sales. If we look, and I listed a few of the top ones on each page, but if we go back to this direct sales software platforms guide, so you can find it youngfarmers.org/sales-software, and we'll put that link in the chat before we're done here. But I've got it open, I think, here. Yeah. So I mentioned a few different sales platforms, but in I was able to find, I think this is 17 or 18 of them last year. So there are more than what I included in the presentation. And when you look at this first page of the guide, it kind of has a few different key features that I think are important to consider, and has a little check mark if that platform supports that feature. This, I'll say, in writing any of these kinds of guides, I'm definitely writing about a moving target. So this I put out last March and then updated it last November. But even since November, there's probably a couple more of these platforms that I either am or am not aware of even existing. And they might have different features. So this definitely is a moving target to be something to be aware of that might be worth checking out something, even if you don't see it here. So the guide basically gives you this big chart of the 17 different platforms. It helps you if you have, so this chart kind of shows you based on sales model, which different products to consider. So this is basically like the presentation that we just went through, except that there are a lot more of them. And I kind of broke out the sales models a little bit more. So like home shipping has its own.
Michael,
yep.
There are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Oh, let me pull up in the chat box then. How do I do that? Zoom. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I don't think you can if you're sharing
there you
your
go.
screen. Yeah.
Which ones can you use on your own website? So yeah, Emma is right. The barn store you can use on your own website. I'm going to pull open that guide and see if I can. I know barn store you can use on your own website. I know Graze Cart you can use on your own website. It might be Open Food Network you have to use on your own website, and that's what I was sort of making the point of, that it's something that you sort of have to administer, like you're going to have to kind of build it into your own website, from what I understand. I don't know if it's possible local food marketplace you could put into your own website, but I'm not certain. But the big one is Barn Store. That's sort of what I think that was a big feature of Barn Store when it came out, that it was something that you didn't have to go to a different website for. You kind of built it within your own. Also, I guess something to remember is that there's the other kinds of e-commerce software that's not farm centric. Typically, you could embed into your own website. So Shopify or Squarespace, maybe not Squarespace, but Square sites you can build into your own website in a way that makes it look seamless to your customers. And that's why a lot of people like using something like Shopify. Okay, let me go back to showing this guide here. I gotta share my screen again, I think. Yes. Oh, okay. That's one of the ones. M mentioned Tend. Tend.ag has a sales platform. I don't actually have any familiarity with it. Tend could be a good thing to use if you are a diversified vegetable producer, because Tend is primarily and was originally like harvest management software and like crop planning software. So if you are already using Tend for that kind of thing, it could make sense to use it as your sales software also. But I'm not. It's pretty new. Like it came out last summer, so I'm not really familiar with like Tend beyond its crop planning software, unfortunately. But if anybody has used Tend for sales, I'd be happy to hear from you. Yeah, and what Monica mentions, using things like Facebook and Instagram for sales, I don't really usually mention those. I think they're great and could potentially be great for some kinds of farms. I just don't think of them as as like a systematic solution, you know, as something where you're gonna keep your inventory and it's gonna process your payments for you. Like if you're selling through Facebook, unless there's new things to Facebook since I've used it, but But if you're going to sell through Facebook, you also need a different payment processor, even if that's like PayPal or something. Whereas any of these e-commerce solutions, like they're doing the payment processing and everything. But yeah, for promoting products, definitely helpful. And I think even these days, if you're doing like sales through Instagram or something, they probably have some kind of solution that you can plug in that you can do the transaction right through Instagram or right through Facebook. But again, I'm not totally sure. And it's definitely not built specifically for farmers to use. Okay, going back to sharing my screen here, and where, no, don't want to look at that. I want to look at this. Okay, so then the last thing in this guide, it goes through each of the platforms that we've highlighted, gives you a little bit of a description, shows you the pricing, or at least the pricing how it was last year, possible to change. One thing to note on the pricing for all of these is that there's going to be credit card transaction pricing and some kind of sales, either percentage of sales or a monthly fee. And again, I can only get into so much detail here. Like you need to go to the website to get the full level of detail. But for instance, Barn to Door had like a 59, maybe a 79 and a 99, depending on, I don't remember what it was. I think depending on some kind of feature. So you really need to look into the site to see what the current price is, or the price that would be for you is. So the guide goes through all these. It has some extra information at the end here. One thing that I'd like to show you specifically is this farmer to farmer exchange e-commerce platforms report. So this is super useful. I'll also put this link into the chat, but I've got it here pulled up. Yeah. So it's just a Google Doc, a very nice looking Google Doc, but this was created by the CSA Innovation Network, which is a group of, it's led by FairShare CSA network, which is I think based out of Wisconsin. But it's basically the CSA Innovation Network is a bunch of different organizations around the country that help with technical assistance with CSA farms. And this report, they basically put out a survey last year around the summer to understand people's use of e-commerce platforms, which ones they liked, which ones they don't like. And they wrote this report about the top 10 that people, I think it's 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, the top 9 that people replied about. So 5 of these are farm specific platforms: Barn to Door, Farmigo, Gracecart, Harvey, and Localine. And 4 are non-farm specific, so Shopify, Square, Squarespace, and WooCommerce. This does a really great job, definitely a better job than my guide, of going in depth on each of these. So after this, it has a page for each of those platforms. And the idea of this is that all of the information was provided by farmers or farm like service organizations. So all these rankings are directly from their farmer survey. It tells you how many people actually rated them. And then it gives you these sometimes video tours. So this one is a video tour by Barn to Door staff. So you have a 7-minute demo of what Barn to Door looks like. Whereas like this one for Farmigo, they have, oh no, this one's also a staff presentation. And some of these, they have like farmers doing demos. Yeah, so this farm actually did a demo for these folks just to show you a video tour of what their Gracecart store looks like. Gracecart, I'll mention, like for anybody doing home delivery, Gracecart gets like rave reviews, and you could see from the rankings here that like Gracecart is the only one in the high 4s like that. Everything else seems to be people have some kind of problems with it. I'll mention also Harvey specifically. Harvey's a really popular one for CSAs, especially in the Midwest, and for people who are doing that really specific kind of model where they want to customize CSA share. You should note though that they also charge 7% per transaction, which is 2 or 3 times as much as most of these platforms cost. And it's because they're, in addition to having this like really specific CSA model, they're also doing a lot of support with your marketing and like helping you get customers and helping you serve your existing customers really well. They just have good customer support like that. So you'd have to consider if that's actually something that you want. Is this much hand-holding from your software company? Is it worth them being like a real partner in your business that way, or are you just looking for a software solution? So let me pull out of this. I'm going to put all these links in the chat so that people have them. And I think we have a good 20 minutes here where we can jump in and out of questions. And if we don't have enough questions, I could also show you Grown By a little bit and maybe give you a little bit of background of what Grown By is and why I went out to create my own one of these products rather than be satisfied with things that exist there. So feel free to either, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but if you can, feel free to ask questions or to put them into the chat here. And I will put these links into the chat that I wanted to share. So that's the one that we just looked at, is the, sorry if you hear my baby crying.
I just want to say, if anyone cannot unmute themselves, if you just put your hand up, I will unmute you.
Okay, and I saw a question there, would Graze Cart be useful for market gardens? And I guess I'll have to say I don't know for sure, but I don't think that that's a very common use for Graze Cart. It's really like meat specific. Or you might be able to use it, but it would be more expensive than an alternative solution that would be just as good for you. I have a 9-month-old baby who's intruding here. Sorry. All right, any other questions, or do you guys want to see a little bit of Grown By?
Let's see Grown By.
Muted. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, let me share my screen. And I guess to give like a quick backup here, the reason that we started creating Grown By was basically that we saw this situation where there were all these different software platforms and none of them seemed to grasp the idea that direct marketing farmers weren't selling in one particular way. They, like most direct marketing farmers that I meet, are diversified marketers that are, both growing diversity of crops. So they're, might be doing livestock and produce and flowers, but also sell in a lot of different places. So it might be selling at like even a very small business that's run by 1 or 2 people might be selling at a farmer's market or 2 and at a farm stand and through a small CSA program and to a couple restaurants. And the problem with most of the platforms is that they do not attempt to solve for all those different sales channels. So if you're running that kind of business, you end up basically running 2 or 3 businesses on the back end if you need to sell all those different ways. And that's just sort of the nature of direct marketing sales, is that you're usually not just doing a CSA, you're usually doing it in a few different ways. So none of the products really felt like they supported diversified marketing in a way that was affordable. So there are still platforms that you can do all those kinds of sales, but you will have to pay for every additional module or like whatever the highest fee is. Even if you're maybe only selling $50,000 to $100,000 a year, you just do it in a really diversified way. Which one approach to that could be, I need to change my sales model. But ideally, the way to approach that is the software should be made for a certain kind of user. And at the Young Farmers Coalition, we just see a lot of those kinds of users, this like small farm starting up that maybe doesn't know exactly where they want to scale up yet. So they sell in 3 or 4 different sales channels. So Grown By, the other thing that was important is in creating this product was discoverability, farm discoverability. So any of these platforms, I think somebody mentioned before, like Facebook is great for just getting the word out. And I think that is a really great way of thinking, that something like Facebook or Instagram or any of these social media networks are just ways for you to say, here's my farm, here's what we sell, and then you give them a link to the way that they could buy from you. Most of these platforms are not going to help you at all getting your word out. You know, it's just a tool for you to make the sales transaction and to manage your inventory, or maybe to do some things like once you make sales, like being able to figure out where, you know, how to pack your trucks, and you know, if you're doing some kind of home delivery, just like knowing your customers' addresses and organizing you that way. But at the end of the day, your customers, like a customer is not going to find you just because you have a Graze card account. Like a new customer is not going to find you, and that's what we feel like is the big thing that marketing software is not addressing. Is like, yeah, I could process sales, but really what a lot of farmers would rather or would love a platform to do is to make them not have to sell so much, so that people could just find you. And it's really, the way I think about it is through platforms like Airbnb, where, you know, 20 years ago, if you were running a bed and breakfast somewhere in a rural place, you might have your own website and you might be able to let people pay you through PayPal, but nobody like driving through your town on a road trip or something is going to find your bed and breakfast, probably, unless they're really good at Googling or something. But with a platform like Airbnb, people who are traveling through places know they can open up Airbnb, and wherever they are in America or the world, they can find all of the people around them that are willing to let them rent their couch for the night or their guest house for a week. And that's the point of, that's the sort of the difference between a platform, a digital platform, and like a digital sales tool. And so while sometimes they're called e-commerce platforms, all these websites, all the like, you know, barn to door and Graze carts and local lines are really just sales tools rather than platforms. And the point of Grown By is for it to be, you know, a true platform. So if we X out here, and because it's a true platform like that, it starts with a map. So if we want to put in a location here, oh wait, I think I have to be on. So it's not out in the world yet, so it could be buggy still. I think I actually want to be on .web.app. Is that true? This is where I live. I don't know why it's not finding me. It's going to be hard to show you Grown By if it's not working for me right now. Let's see if I reset it here. Let's go through this. Huh. What are you doing? I think it's not going to be able to use my current location. Okay. Well, for some reason, I can't get this to work, and I'm not sure why, but it could have to do with it being in development currently. So I'll just post a link to grownby.app so people can play with it themselves over the next few days. But maybe the thing to show you then is, if you wanted to sign up to know when you actually can start using Grown By as a farm, you just go to farmgenerations.coop, and there's a wait list here that you can fill out the form for, basically, and we'll alert you when it's available to be used. by most folks. I'll put this in the chat. I think a thing that I guess haven't mentioned yet is that, and Monica, I think you asked, post link to the CSA Coalition doc. It's a little bit further up, but I'll post it again. It's this one. It's the CSA Innovation Network report. The other thing that I should mention, like you see that it's farmgenerations.coop. So we're, the platform is cooperatively owned. So the point is that we're not like, you know, venture capital backed or anything like that. We've been getting grants through this agricultural cooperative. And as we kind of get the product out there, we're also going to make membership available to people. So if you wanted to be a member owner and own a piece of Grown By, the co-op is set up for that. So the idea is to have the user, the like essential user of the platform, farmers, be able to have some kind of like governance stake over the platform itself, which is definitely a challenge for any kind of like, the more you get into this world of building software, the more you realize like the role of money in building software and role of like capital investment in building software, that it just costs a lot to build and to maintain and to build new features. And so you end up with a lot of stakeholders. You end up with, you know, investors that have a stake in it, have different goals than the users. And so we're trying to approach it in a way that's more like focused on what stakeholder we think is the most important, which is the farmer selling on the platform. Sorry, I can't make it work there. The Grown By is also built specifically for mobile. So once it's out in the world, you're better off using it. You know, you could use it on the web, but you also will be able to use it more on your phone. It'll be like an app that you download from the App Store. Any other questions about either other platforms or just like your own farm's sort of experience or the way you're approaching this decision, or if you're approaching a decision of trying to sell online?
When you were first talking about Grown By, you said that you find a lot of the young farmers, they don't know exactly where they're gonna, I guess, grow into, like what market channel. And that's where I'm at. So we're just starting a CSA this year. And I was looking at all these things. And I saw this report back in December. I looked through it along with the national, or whatever the other coalition one was.
Yeah, it's CSA Innovation
Network. CSA Innovation Network. And I mean, I poured over those things. And really the best I could come up with is start a Square store, because I don't know what the heck I'm going to want to do later.
Yeah, honestly, that is, I feel like it's often not the advice that like farm service providers want to hear or give to farmers, but because there's like a lot of these platforms that were made specifically for farmers, but often the things like Square or Shopify, like you could even see in their ratings from that CSA Innovation Network survey, they're usually better products. And they usually have things like plugins that even if you run a CSA, you could get some kind of subscription plugin to Shopify and make it work. It might cost quite a bit to get a plugin, like more than some of the farm-centric platforms. But if you're just doing basic sales, probably one of those standard e-commerce platforms is a better first step, at least. One thing that's a little bit that, you know, if I were running a business, I would want to stay away from them, though, is jumping around too much, because it is a lot of work to, you know, any of these platforms will say, yeah, it just takes a couple hours to get your storefront set up. And maybe it does if you do it for a living. But most of the farmers that I work with, you know, this is like a big decision that you don't want to do. Certainly don't want to do more than once a year, but I don't even think you want to do every year. You want to get something that you're comfortable with, that you can feel a connection with the company, feel like if it doesn't do something that you need it to do, they'll make it do that for you by next season. I think is a really important part of this, because all these software companies are pretty small companies. You should be able to call them up and talk to somebody there. Mark, you asked if Grown By allows for delivery option and adding delivery fees, and right now it does not. So it does CSA subscription sales or what we call pre-order sales. So you set up, any kind of distribution site like like at a farmer's market or at your farm stand, and you can basically sell products for those specific distribution sites. So you could kind of hack it to do home delivery if you wanted to. You basically just set like a distribution site in a particular town, and then you have to collect your customers' addresses in order to do the delivery, but it's not built for home delivery yet. But I guess that was the point I was making with like Grown By trying to be a platform for diversified sales. Is that's one thing that we're going to be trying to build in 2021, because we know that that's something that farmers are looking for. But right now, just a CSA or any of those kinds of pre-order sales. Well, if
Thank
there's
you, Michael.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I'm going to put the survey link in the chat box for everyone.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to stick around at least for the next 5 minutes here where we have time. If anybody has further questions, either in the chat or feel free to call them out. And I'll put my, I'm just going to put my email address in here in the chat in case people want to reach out directly. You're always welcome to. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I feel like Gray's card is that if you're doing livestock, if you're doing home delivery or shipping, everybody seems to love Gray's card. So it's nice to hear.